Welcome to Experiential Design Week. I'm Eric Duncan, Senior Experiential Designer at IA Interior Architects. Each year, IA hosts Experiential Design Week to celebrate the unique role of art and design within our larger architectural practice. This year, we'll be joined in conversation by a roster of creative luminaries from around the globe to discuss their creative processes, to consider the value of experience, and ostensibly to make connections between their work and our own. For each conversation, I'll be joined by one of my colleagues at IA, each of whom bring their own unique perspective and will also ensure that I won't be the only voice you hear this week. Today, I'm fortunate to be joined by Alexandria Davis, a designer in our New York studio, and we're thrilled to chat with today's guest. In a city of prized cultural institutions, from the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater to Zabar's, see the little A to Z thing I did there, none has remained as consistently relevant to our cultural discourse as Saturday Night Live. Ooh. For nearly 50 years, it's been an institution unlike any other, spawning some of comedy's best moments and its biggest stars. This is all made possible by an incredible group of performers, writers, and a production team that knows no equivalent. That's why it's such a unique privilege to welcome today's guest, a mega talent and brilliant production designer at Saturday Night Live, whose work has just been recognized with an Emmy nomination. How cool is this? Andrea, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. My name is Andrea Purcigliotti. I am a production designer, as you've been told, for the Saturday Night Live film unit. The film unit is the unit for the show that's responsible for everything pre-tape. So if you see a little snippet of content where they're, let's go to the videotape, or a news intro, or a fake music video, or a parody commercial, short film, that's our team.
SNL is an environment unlike any other. I can't imagine what you go through week to week, but famously, sketches for Saturday's live show aren't chosen until late Wednesday night, giving the entire cast and crew only 3 days to create that week's show. Can you talk about your process from Thursday to Saturday?
A typical prior to COVID week was I would go into Saturday Night Live at 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. All of the cast, all of the writers, all of the crew for the actual live show is across the hall in the writer's room. Film unit would convene in an office nearby, and we would just read our scripts, which is anywhere from 12 to 15 scripts that are earmarked for pre-tape content. You're basically reading scripts and having a dinner and talking with the location folks about, well, if we get this script, should we shoot it in a location like a house in Ditmas Park or Astoria? Oh, this one is a school. Let's see if the Catholic school in Astoria, St. John's, will have us this week. We would have these, we need a swimming pool. Do we want to do that in like a public pool, or do we want a private pool, or in a sports club? Just spitballing through all of the possibilities and parameters of the script. We used to kid around that if the minute you started drawing it, you jinxed it and it would die. So you can't, and still to this day, you really can't spend any time jumping on something new. The most that we do or would do on a Wednesday night was refer to older things that we had done and maybe pull those drawings, find out which parts still exist. Did we inventory and save those? Are those evergreen? Are those stock? Whatever happened to the news desk that we made for the CNN piece? Oh, wait, the live show has a CNN desk. If they don't have a CNN sketch this week, can we borrow that? Like those kind of conversations. But basically by somewhere between 8:30 and 11 p.m. on Wednesday night, we would get picks. I also need to address now that there are three film units. I am not the only unit. The production designer for Beast unit is Ken McLeod, and Ghost unit's designer is named Mark Newell, and they're seasoned production designers. So Wednesday night, we get our pieces, and then each team would go and collect in the director's office. Um, and we would get on either, you know, this is in the early days of conference calling. It wasn't really that, it was more like as many people that SNL film unit thought it was smart to bring in, which may or may not have been our DP, which is just mind boggling. It would typically be the set decorator, which is, as a production designer, that is our right hand. And then a team of producers, and then the writers would come in and explain, in their kind of mind's eye, what the words on the paper meant. And the design process, like me sitting down with SketchUp, everyone has left to go home to go to sleep, would start for me at midnight. Yeah. What's changed over COVID was we got a home base. And the interesting thing about that was we never had a steady, secure, committed stage to shoot in. There were many times where we needed a stage and one wasn't available, so we would have to go to a warehouse or just a large space and make set building happen in a space that maybe doesn't have a lighting grid or isn't soundproof. So the fact that we got a stage, a fully committed stage for the SNL film unit, has been a huge game changer. But it also means that there are no more locations. But what's happened over time is that, the other departments, the talent department especially, like being 15 blocks from 30 Rock is life changing for everyone. It made, just it's just so important working out of the same space for so many of the other crews. It's made my life a living nightmare because 22 shows out of a season, I am building a set, even if it's a bar and there's a bar down the street that we could go in the middle of the night, or bringing the outside inside, which is anytime we need to emulate a park or the front lawn of somebody's house, or et cetera, et cetera.
But still doing all of that in 3 days, like that's insane. I mean,
It's
you've had to
insane.
you've had to pivot, and like most of us had to, during COVID. But do you even have time for the creative blocks, or now this new level of adaptation due to not being able to go to a location?
I would say that the only form of that, it's not creative block on my part. It's problem solving. It's like, what do we need to tell the story? And sometimes everybody being in the full understanding of what that is the block. That sometimes can be the delicate dance or the difficulty, or the workaround. What's in the writer's mind eye many times is not what's in the director's mind's eye. And I have to just sort of sit back and let them work that out, because that's the pecking order. Design can be funny. You saw what I did there. It's it is a very much a delicate dance. And to tie in, question about checking one's ego, my ego is flossed by being able to help tell the story. But I need so much guidance from the director. And a lot of times, some of the problems that we have to deal with, whether it's timeline or availability of things, or a special vendor needs to create that, other things present itself. So rather than saying like a hard no, it's usually phrased like, I can't provide that for you in our timeline, but these are your options. So you've got this, you've got this, you've got this. And sometimes the joke translates better in some of these other options. Sometimes they don't want to freaking hear it. Sometimes they're like, no, I want the inflatable toilet. It's got to inflate on screen. And we're like, okay, I guess we're going to figure out how to become model makers of inflatables.
I'm curious to know, is the design process ever iterative at all? Or does that kind of compressed timeline mean that what you concept is what's produced for that week's show?
No, 100%. I mean, there's so much repetition involved. I mean, what's happened over time. So now, like, we have this great space, and it used to be a soap opera studio. So it's got loads of history and it's got loads of storage, and we have a little scenery dock and a construction shop, and we have props department, and so it's really fantastic now because we have an arsenal, a well manned arsenal that's stockpiled with all of our greatest hits. And so the trick sometimes is how do we make this feel fresh? I mean, we recycle designs quite a bit because a lot of times the comedy is just asking for a a 30 something apartment. Okay, so is this an apartment in is it in New York? Are we outside of New York? Where are we? Where in the world are we? um so we can even rearrange the rooms of existing set design. And as well know, working from SketchUp, it becomes extremely rapid, intuitive. And then we've started our own SketchUp warehouse of set pieces. So even if something, because of space, gets destroyed because we can't save a 42-foot consoled out spaceship, we can save the elements from it, but we'll just have the shop build that curved wall again. Or, oh, you know what? Like, let's use that curved wall, and instead of putting all the consoles in it, let's pop in windows and make it feel like a really sexy, swanky hotel lobby. So we do definitely rearrange the set pieces quite a bit, and it's made us faster.
That's so crazy. That's so amazing that you have this team and this encyclopedia of, I guess, design elements and warehouses that have these things that support you. Are there any other resources you rely on to create these environments so quickly? I mean, if the shop's not making it, where are you getting those specialty light fixtures? Or if you need, I'm sure you have to do like furniture and wallpaper, and you have to do cues. Like, you have to set up if there's a cue or if there's a dance sequence that's coming on. How are you working with some of those other elements as they're coming into the space?
In terms of my team, so the set decorator is by my side, a woman by the name of Danielle Webb. She's been doing it, almost nearly as long as I have at SNL. And then she has her assistant, Sarah Parks, who's a brilliant decorator in her own right. And these people, we it's a freelance world. So, a lot of the big commercials that you see or episodic shows, these women work on as well. So their arsenal, their encyclopedia of knowledge is just as vast. And there's trust, and there's sign language, and nods and grunts, and we're very used to working with each other, and that makes it that much easier.
And that's a great kind of lead into the next question. Then, how much of the set's description is on the page, or what's the process of working with the writers to create that built environment?
I think it really depends. Like, you take a script that is parodying something that exists in the world, like House of Dragons, or like we did the Barbie parody for American Girls. Sometimes there's definite scenes from these existing things that's what the writer had in their mind's eye for it. A lot of times it's more of like the zeitgeist of the thing, like a HGTV thing, or like, we want the design studio, we want that to feel very HGTV, like that kind of lighting and that kind of like amount of, what those feel like. And I was like, it's great that we work in SketchUp because you want to be looking at SketchUp models. So, we'll design you a couple of SketchUp models of the before and after. And then what do you want the other environment to be? Is that going to be like a house in progress? Like, do we want to see stud work and just unfinished work in progress house? And And they were like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. So a lot of times it's just pulling out what that is.
I was scrolling through some of your IMDb credits, and you've collaborated with, some of the biggest names in pop culture. I don't presume to know the hubris that anyone brings to the table, but can you describe what it's like to collaborate with an artist who may also bring their own strong creative viewpoints?
So the director is really that person for us. And what the director will do is he'll take his or her thoughts on the what that talent is needs. But so many times, more often than not, our talent is just so happy to be part of the show and the cultural institution of such, and they don't know what to expect. They're usually hugely impressed by the amount of production that they're walking into, because they're coming from the 30 Rock world, which enough has been documented about what that looks like, and everyone's thrown together in this small studio in 30 Rock, and the stagehands are moving scenery on trucks while people are standing there in partial costume as they're learning the sketches. And then they read the script on Wednesday night. They hear that that's the one that's getting picked, or if they happen to be one of the writers on it, they have explained to the writers from our show that have collaborated with them on the script about what they'd like it to be. And then they walk into a full-on production on Friday morning, and they're usually like, what the heck? And they're hugely impressed. And that's like the gravy to just watch them clap. Or who's the art department on, like when they call you out and they like actually know that there's a whole department that does that, or what, where are, oh my god, you guys are incredible, you did this in what, and and that's just the greatest, absolutely the greatest.
And I know you just mentioned like that was a potentially a Friday morning. What's the latest you've ever delivered a set for production?
A typical timeline for SNL is, as I said, 6:30 in the morning. I get to the scenery shop in the Brooklyn Navy Yard with our drawings, and you guys, you understand what's going on? Like, we can't build you all the scenery. We need to streamline. Where can we streamline? And so that usually triggers a version 2, or I have an assistant art director that sits at the shop and makes sure that all 3 separate film units pieces are separate, and all of the little things that happen in the design process to construction process get honed out with boots on the ground person in the shop. The shop has 10 hours to build that. And so by 6 p.m. Thursday night to 9 p.m. Thursday night, the scenery is getting loaded onto the trucks and it's coming over to the studio. It gets built, scenic, and dressed overnight Thursday. And then typically Friday morning, somewhere between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m., we're shooting. When you have a bigger piece that's either like a Star Wars piece, we're able to push our shoot later in the day. So the other units will get their sets up first and shoot their pieces out. The other thing that affects sometimes in our favor is when we're getting the host. Like the host is such a heavy load at the live show, and then they picked 3 film unit pieces this week, and the host is in all 3. So we're not going to get the host until much later in the day. So that sort of helps the assistant director decide, how to plan out what we're going to shoot.
That's amazing, especially because I know you're saying this so in such a linear context, but we know this is not like a linear process for you and the team. So it's just so amazing that you all are getting this thought out and constructed and then ready for set. But projects can also have like their curveballs, or be difficult for a myriad of reasons. Is there one in particular that stands out, or a challenge that was very specific that you and your team overcame?
very, very rarely do we go, wow, this was a light week. This was easy. Like each week presents a whole new learning curve of how to do or how not to do something. Or if this ever comes up in the future, let's make sure that we have this conversation prior to it. It's constantly shifting and pivoting and figuring out. I mean, it is very much a well-oiled machine, but the other thing too that I think people have built into their their workflow is not to be disappointed. Like at some point something's not going to make it on the truck. It's New York City, but very rarely do we not deliver. And a lot of times that there's other things that are able to present themselves as a solution to that problem. It can be very collaborative on the fly. So it's really, there's some beautiful magic that happens in those moments.
Right. We'll figure it out.
100%.
I totally get you. And that's just so interesting. And I can definitely feel your passion as you're talking about this. And, I feel like in certain careers, you have to have that passion to push you through some of those like difficult times and those obstacles. So I'm just curious, how did you get into production design originally? Like, what was your inspiration, your motivation? I love an origin story.
I was always artistic. I come from a very working class family, so I was expected to go to college, and I was going to have to figure out a way to make art work as a career option. So I went to FIT. I studied illustration for 2 years, and I studied a genre of fashion design for accessories. What was great about studying both of those is two-dimensional, idea, two-dimensional drawing, three-dimensional object. That's all I do. That's all I do for a living is idea, two-dimensional, three-dimensional. Sometimes not in that order, but nonetheless. So I did enjoy being at FIT in the late 80s, early 90s. The problem with that was the whole technology revolution hadn't happened. Nothing was digital. It was all analog. I went back to school in my mid-20s and tied everything up in a fine art degree. I went to the University of Albany, and then I did an independent study program. I used to work on very, very large paintings. I studied mural making. So my first jobs in the business was as a scenery artist, and I loved scenic art. It was really easy to translate from coming from mural making and fine arts. But the funny thing is that my independent study year of my last year, my BFA, was our studio was next to a photography studio, and the photography studio at the end of their jobs would throw away the scenery flats. And so every so often I would end up like stumbling on their garbage. And here were these beautiful large surfaces, 4 foot by 8 foot. I'm like, who throws this away? Why is this in the garden? And so I started just hoarding flats. And then I started painting my huge portraits or my little vignettes and scenes and on the flats. And then I would look in the studio and I'd be like, oh wow, they actually put like this picture frame thing on the back of it, so they freestand, so they're not on the wall. Wow, that's cool. And then the lights, they would stand the lights in front. Interesting. I didn't study theater design. I didn't know that was even a thing. I had no idea that what I do for a living today was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, because we always think about things as being linear. Like, we know you're a brilliant production designer, so of course you were always this brilliant production designer. But it's so fascinating you get this behind the scenes peek at, how this actually came to be for you.
I have to say that in terms of like desirable industries that people want to get in, I mean, yes, can you go to Tisch School of the Arts and have a brilliant belly of film business taught to you? 100% yes. And will it give you great connections and great mentors and instructors? Yes. But I really do, and I've seen it. So this comes from experience. This isn't hearsay. I feel like there is a great diplomacy, there's a great democracy in the film business, because I've seen kids from the projects start loading trucks, for productions, end up behind the camera. I've seen people stumble onto set from somewhere not called film school and figure out what they want to do and find a home in the film business. And I think that's important. And that's one of the things, like, that's how I secretly get back at the film business, because we can be horribly wasteful. There can be a lot of gatekeeping. It can be, a difficult place to negotiate sometimes. But I've seen it happen enough that if you're driven, if there's, like, I always say that the cookie is baked with 3 ingredients and the ratios change all the time. It's hard work, it's positioning oneself, and it's luck. So if I can be the little bit of luck that helps, somebody that wouldn't have the opportunity to go to film school or, get into the business, I definitely like to be that bit of luck for them. So it's just a little story about how it happens sometimes.
Well, you touched upon this earlier, but given the convenience of technology, it's easy to imagine, how everything could just be performed in front of a green screen. What is the value of the physical set?
What the physical set affords is control, and like the physical set over the location set, you're not dealing with there's a whole host of, outside issues that you're dealing with the minute you leave the studio. So, you have a soundproofed environment that's very controlled. And you have multiple angles that you can deal with. You can take out little vignettes from the set and tabletop them. There's just so many more options that a set can afford.
No, and I'm getting more amazed as you're talking about it, honestly. And it's interesting because I'm seeing a lot of parallels too. So when we're designing for a client, one of the best parts of our jobs are like those small crafted little details, which makes the physical space so important, because you can hide little Easter eggs, here and there, that are meaningful or that can create a meaningful experience, for the client or the user group that's coming in. I'm wondering, are there any surprising details or Easter eggs that you've layered into your work, such as props or family photos or anything?
Oh yeah, I mean that stuff happens all the time. But I'd say the real jokers in our department is the graphics team, because they have to come up with printed documents or words or things. So, like, some of our spaceships, like the actual words on the control panels are like lyrics to Fleetwood Mac songs, or just complete gibberish. And it's always so much fun to, like, oh, look what graphics did over here. I'd say the jokiest as designers that we can get would be, like, for example, last season the Barbie parody that we did was based on a line of actual historic American Girl dolls that were based on people in history. And so for us, playing with scale is our like nerd moment, where we get to, geek out on details, like we made short, fat doorways, like maybe they were 6 foot tall by like 4 feet wide. And we made the architrave, the door moldings, like way fatter than they normally need to be. Making the baseboard molding higher than it ever needs to be. And so some of the jokes were in the design of that room.
We mentioned the cultural icons you've collaborated with, names that would intimidate any of us. Was there ever a moment you experienced imposter syndrome? And if so, how did you move beyond those feelings of self-doubt?
I would just say that I didn't learn the traditional way, which is, some of my colleagues. I'm floored and awed by their talent, especially, like, my art director is incredible. She came up, she went to school as an architect. She decided that wasn't her path, and that she always loved theater, and so she went to grad school in scenic design, and the the folks that she worked with, and the amount of drafting that one has to do in the theater realm is just like every cue needs to be drafted, and you're drafting in AutoCAD or Vectorworks, and just like stuff like this. I want what they have, but I'm also, in a position as a production designer where I can have these people working for me, so as I was learning my craft, I was always backtracking and going back to school. So I went back to school and I took classes in AutoCAD. Then I went back to school and I took classes in Vectorworks. And then, I always felt like I was catching up, and part of that is where the imposter syndrome, comes from.
That's super inspiring to hear, and I think lessons we can all take. You've talked about working these, incredible hours that I can't even imagine. So I wondered whether you actually have responsibilities during the live show on Saturday night. Are you able to enjoy from home, or do they ever use you as an extra?
Yeah, I don't have. I have very little to do with the live show. I don't. It's parallel universes. I'm done by Friday. I refer to Saturday as migraine day because all of the stress. Saturday date migraine. All of the stress and lack of sleep tends to manifest itself into a bit of a creaky start on Saturday.
Well, one, I think you'd probably be exhausted. Like you would probably be exhausted if you were going from, tape then to the live team. But having that break in time but still having that condensed like work schedule, just wondering, are there any particularly memorable moments on the set that has stood out to you, or memorable experiences that you've had during that process, or with hosts or with the team?
We got to work with Dave Chappelle again this season for House of Dragons, and I'd say the pieces that we got nominated for the Emmy is the Steve Martin short, and our piece was called A Christmas Carol, and it was obviously a spin on that, and it was a Dickensian English village. Then it was the Jenna Ortega Waffle House sketch, which wasn't huge in its design, but there was a lot of gags going on for that. The Mario Kart was a huge set decoration piece. I mean, there were sets involved, but they had to be built small so they could be comped larger in VFX. So there were some really difficult design challenges this year. We've definitely done some of the biggest pieces that we've ever done in past season 48.
It sounds like you are continually raising the bar. I can't imagine what's next for your team if this is the bar that you've set currently.
Yeah, we joke about that quite a bit. We're like, when does it all go wrong? At what point does the whole thing just implode and we all die?
I get a lot of secondhand joy when others experience something fantastic. So I'm curious to know, when was the last time that you were awed?
In terms of like the live show, like some of those John Mulaney sketches, those Broadway musicals, that's just incredible. That whole, maybe even more so for me, because I know how difficult it is for that to work within the context of the live show. So those pieces are always incredible to see.
Well, I would say even as a viewer watching those John Mulaney sketches that you just referenced, I can't imagine how these things are happening in real time as we're watching them, many miles away. Incredible.
And then to take it one step further, like taking it out of the realm of SNL, because being in the insider and knowing how things work, people do what I do, and that's when the imposter syndrome kicks in, because I'm like, how the hell did they do that? I'm wowed all the time, because it's like, I know all the tricks and the bells and whistles, and to see it in the different context and be impressed by it, which happens more often than not.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then I start to research, and then I look at their art department, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So there's 5 draftsmen. There's like 40 people on the special effects team. I'm like, yeah, okay, I know how it is happening, and the millions and millions of dollars that get dumped into it. So, you know, um, I have to talk myself sometimes off the ledge, because there's a lot of craftsmen involved in what we do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, well, I'm curious, Alex, when was the last time that you experienced awe?
Uh, I mean, besides right now,
Huh.
because truly, one of the things that I've always loved as a creative is I love the process. I love being in maker spaces, and the final product is amazing and it's beautiful, but seeing how people get there is always so interesting to me. I love to see how the mind is working. Like, to be a fly on the wall, in your team's like ideation room would be like so crazy, because I'm seeing how people adapt in the moment and how they say, okay, pivot, we have to make another decision. That's just so meaningful to me. And I don't know if you went to the Basquiat exhibit. I went end of last year. So amazing, so beautiful. I know they pulled in an architecture design team to help with that as well. But what I love so much about it was that it was like this immersive, you know, exhibit, but it also showed his process, that for me, that was really awe-inspiring, because you got to see, like, they remade part of his studio, so you could see, like, the mess of the studio, because, like, I mean, when I have days where I'm like painting at home, it's not clean in here. Like, there's like paint everywhere, and there's like, and like I'm wearing like my paint sweatpants because it has stuff on them. Like, it's not, so I just, the process, anything that has process to it, is just so meaningful to me.
My birthday gift this year from my husband, he took me to Dessau, and we went to the Bauhaus. And as it is the Bauhaus, and all its referentialness, and it's very ubiquitous nowadays, and I understand why. But to go to ground zero of where this happened, and in the context of when it happened, and before this war, and the just some of the parallels of what was going on between then and now, and just being there, I can't tell you, as an artist, it was just so important for me. I think that when you get to immerse yourself into the process of whether it's an artist or a design team, or, like you said, the maker space, it's really important, because there's a magic that happens there, that it just through just by breathing the air.
I love that you do that, because I think it's, especially after COVID and everyone was inside for so long, stimulating the mind again, and not through videos, not through the internet, but being somewhere and feeling, the space like that, I think is so meaningful, and becoming curious again, I think is so meaningful for the creative process. So, by the way, me and my friends, you should totally play this with some of your friends. We call it museum roulette or exhibit roulette. So we'll just go in like a social, and Saturday morning we'll just like say whatever pops up, is where we're going to go to today. And like whatever exhibits pop up in New York, we just go to them. And that's just like,
that's a great idea. Because I said to Danielle, our decorator, I was like, do you want to go and look at art with me? Just so we could just start, because she has a fine art background too. Just so we could start talking about art again. I feel like I need to do that more. And why do I need to actually make it like on a punch list of things to do? Like, why it never happened naturally? But I suppose it has to do with my own personal fight with art making. And I've recently enrolled in a mosaic class, which has been really, really fun and enjoyable, because I enjoy process-based art making. So maybe I can figure out, like, you really need to premeditate what it is that you want to make, when it's going to take X many thousand hours to make. So maybe that'll help me come up with, the subject matter of what it is that I want to talk quicker than painting did,
You're going to have to come back and show us some of your process.
I will.
Dying to see that.
Yeah. And Eric, what about you? What What's been your most recent awe-inspiring moment or experience?
Yeah, well, you just mentioned being a fly on the wall during this design process. I recently learned about a documentary that was filmed in 1997 while Bjork was recording her third solo album, Homogenic. I think a lot of people consider this period to be, one of her creative peaks. And the documentary offers this really detailed look at her creative process. Like you're watching her dictate incredible string arrangements of Hunter, which were all recorded live, by the way. That blew me away. And you see her working on lyrics while her symphony plays Joga. And it was very Bjork too. Like she talked about the convenience of recording on an 8-track. And she was like, you can write on an airplane, or you can write at a friend's house, or on the top of a volcano, like that common thing. And anyway, the documentary was an episode of a series called The South Bank Show, and I can't recommend it enough. Totally awe-inspiring. Oh, we have one final question for you, and that is, just because you know where it's going to lead, when you're on a plane and someone asks you what you do you ever just lie to them and tell them that you're a barista?
No, I don't. I tell them that I design sets for film and TV, because that's the standard issue. I'm not going to interact with you too much unless if you can respond positively from that, or what I just said, then we can have a conversation about it. Because a lot of times people, they're like, oh, I don't really, what is that? What does that mean? What is, like, the actors and stuff? And I'm like, no, well, behind the actors is stuff, and I bring that stuff, and that's it. And then if people know a bit more about what it is, then we talk about it. But I don't really disclose the show unless people ask what I have heard of the show that you work on, and I'm like, possibly. And you'd be surprised with young people nowadays. Many people know the sketches just because they kind of resonate on a level, but they don't really know where they come from, and and then of course there are many people that are so super excited when they hear I work for SNL, and then they want to talk about it for hours, which is really nice.
Well, you better hope you never get a plane seat next to me, and you better hope it's not a long flight.
No, I love questions about the show, and I love being able to dig up some of the photographic evidence of, like, some of the excuse my French, fuckery that we engage in. It's a lot of fun to have conversations about it. I love what I do. I always say that if I won the lottery and I never needed to work in my entire life again, there are a few jobs that I would keep, and this is one of them. I would do this for free. Don't tell my boss.
Edit that out.
I mean, we're all so eager for SNL to return. We know you are as well. This has been such an illuminating peek behind the curtain, and a real privilege for both Alex and I to have so much of your time. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us for Experiential Design Week, an annual series by IA Interior Architects. If you enjoyed today's discussion, and if you appreciate great design, we invite you to visit interiorarchitects.com/EDW for more conversations with the incredible creatives we admire. While you're there, you can learn more about IA and discover the remarkable work our studios are producing around the globe.